work-life balance. That's the term that's been bandied about. But you say that's a myth. Why?
Yes, yes. Well, the balance piece of it is kind of the bit of the myth there, and the core of the myth is in this conversation of work-life balance. Almost every time I read an article or something like that, it talks about we've got to manage time. Time management. Oh, Daryl, you do that time management course. I say, no, I don't. I don't teach time management. You can't teach time management.
Okay.
It's a myth.
So
because we can't
answer?
manage time. Right?
You can't manage
time. Time is what it is. Yeah,
okay.
Time is what it is. You get 24 hours in 7 days a week. That's it. You can't change that. I tried to go with the approach of managing time by adding another hour in the day. That didn't work. It just caused more stress.
Okay.
So my colleague Bill Guillory and another one of our colleagues, Trapper Woods, they designed an approach that we call it, work-life integration. And that's simply saying, let's stop managing time. That's a myth. And let's focus on managing activities, the activities that we are given to take care of in the time that we have. So once we shift our mindset to that which we can really manage, see, now all of a sudden I have a completely different level of accountability. Now
it feels like I can breathe in that space.
Yes, because all of a sudden I can manage activities, but when I was trying to manage time, it wasn't working.
Right. So, and that falls under too, we try to draw this line of demarcation separating our personal life from our work life, as if we become two different people. And I imagine some people do have these personalities that show up in different places. But you say that's a myth as well. Yes.
So another thing that we talk about, you heard me use the term work-life integration.
Yes.
Well, that's the reason why we use that term. We use a spectrum that simply says, on a scale from little integration to high integration, we're saying that depending upon where you are in your life and the job that you do, your job, your life might have some level of separation where, I clock out at 5 o'clock and I live 30 minutes from where I work, and so the example I use, once I'm in, the Walmart or the Target where I live, no one from work is probably going to see me, and so I could pretty much live my life separately.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other side of the spectrum that says, I'm in this small town. I work here. I live here. I go to the store. I go to the grocery store, and I see Mrs. Jones who wants to talk about her bunion. Right? And I'm thinking in that moment, oh my gosh, Miss Jones, I'm trying to get my soy milk.
Right. Right.
I don't want to talk about your bunion, but that's work-life integration showing up at its best. Or maybe the flip side, even if I am, on the lower end of the integrated spectrum, I can say, when I get that phone call from my neighbor who has the apartment above me, and they say, hey, guess what? There's a little challenge. I had a little spill. A pipe broke, and now my water is going into your apartment. In that moment, my personal life has just become integrated with my work life. And so when we start to accept that reality, we get less stressed when they spill into each other. And then we start figuring out how we can respond. Again, it's about responding to that situation.
And what I'm hearing from you as an overall theme, it's about really being aware, not turning your back on what is and pretending it's not there.
There you go. Exactly. And it's the big piece of, the last part we talk about is becoming the CEO of you. It's the accountability conversation. We include and infuse this discussion of accountability in everything that we do. So work-life integration is about taking accountability for managing those life activities.
Okay.
Diversity and inclusion, it's about taking accountability for how I'm responding to that diversity tension.
Now you're asking people to grow up and be an adult when you're talking about accountability.
Exactly.
How do you handle someone who just says, well, I don't see why we need to change. Things are fine just the way they are.
Well, that's a person that's probably things are fine for them. And oftentimes, if we go back to the dimensions, to those diversity differences, if I am in what I call the dominant culture, the dominant group of any one of those dimensions, right? So as an example, if I am in an organization where I am at the senior leadership level, and I have this is just a simple example. I have my parking space is right in front of my office. And all of a sudden, the employees are complaining about there's not enough parking. We need a bigger parking lot because I have to get to work at 8 o'clock to fight for a parking space, even though I really don't start work until 8:45. But we've got this parking space game, and so HR comes to me and tells me about this parking thing, and I'm looking at them like, why are you telling me about parking? That's no issue. That's not a big deal. That's not an issue at all. And then HR says, well, Daryl, it's not an issue for you, because you have a parking space right in front of your office. You have dominant culture privileges. And if we're experiencing dominant culture privileges, we don't get it as easily when others not experiencing those privileges are having challenges. And so we have to step out of our own situation and humble ourselves to others' situations to better understand where they are.
That's a great example, and as you were talking, I kept thinking about Marie Antoinette when the people were, before the French Revolution, when they didn't have bread, and she said, "Well, let them eat cake." It's that kind of mindset.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. No malintent, usually. Sometimes yes, but usually no malintent. Just this is the world that I operate in. What's wrong? What's the big deal?